Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you're new here, please click on like and subscribe. Today I'm going to be building some birdhouses out of some scrap leftover fence pickets. So if you were starting this project from new, you could probably do this with one fence picket. I've got my scrap pieces kind of stacked up so I can see different lengths, because a couple of them are going to be the same size, a couple of them will be different sizes, but at least I've got some idea of where I'm starting at. So I need to make the front and the back of the birdhouse, so I'm going to measure mine at 7.5 inches. And I want to cut the front and the back at the same time. So I only need one piece that's marked that way. So basically after I draw my straight line, I'll carry over two pieces of wood that are close to the same length and chop them off at the same time. So the next thing I need to do is find the middle of my board. Now since these are fence planks, they're not always perfectly even. Some are a little thinner, some are a little bit wider. If you want to make these perfect birdhouses, you can trim off the edges of these and make these boards exactly the same if you want. I'm just going to get as close as I can to the center of them because I'll probably replace the birdhouses in a year or two anyhow. Once I find the center of the board, I'm going to make a mark down the middle so I can see where it's at. And what I need to do is make a 45-degree pitch at the top. Now I'm not a framer, I might get some of these terms wrong. If you know the correct terms or a better way to word it, please let me know in the comments below. But basically I want a 45-degree angle at the top. So I'm going to do 22.5 degrees and 22.5 degrees. I'm going to cut the two sides off and that'll give me a 45-degree angle in the middle. That's not going to give me a 45-degree pitch or slope. It'll give me a much subtler slope. It should give me a 22.5-degree slope. So I'm going to cut both of these at the same time just like I did before. Make sure your boards are close together and tight. I'm going to cut off one side. I'm going to reverse the saw, spin it around the other way. So I'm cutting from my outside edge at 22.5 degrees to my center point. I'm going to spin it around. This time I'm going to start at my center point, and at 22.5 degrees that should leave me a 45-degree angle at the top. Now that I've got that done, I want to go ahead and drill the hole for my birdhouse. I want to do this first because I'm using these fence planks. They're not the solidest wood, I'm not sure if that's a word or not, I just made it up. They're not the most solid wood. So basically I don't want to put a lot of pressure on anything once I glue it together. So I'm going to go ahead and drill my hole now. I'm doing an 1.5 inch hole, and I just kind of measured mine to where I thought it looked good at. You can get precise if you want to. You might want yours higher or lower. But basically I'm just going to cut mine out where I feel like it looks good at. This part is optional also. I've got a 7/16 dowel laying around. Don't know why. Had it left over from another project. Again, this is all scrap wood material. So if you want to put a little dowel or a little rod for your bird to sit on to get into the house, you can do that. You could also take a couple little pieces of scrap wood and just make a little square cleat for them to sit on. Since I already have this dowel rod, I'm going to go ahead and drill a small hole in here and put the dowel rod in for the bird. Again, same thing. I'm not really measuring. I'm just kind of guesstimating how big a bird is and popping a hole in there. I'm ready to measure my sides out. Now what I'm doing is I'm measuring the side. As you can see, it's 6.25 inches. If I make the side piece 6.25 inches, the top piece where the roof comes down is going to hit that board. So I either have to cut the top edge at a 22.5-degree angle to match the roof pitch, or I'm just going to cut my board down to 6 inches. This will do two things. This will, one, allow me to put my roof on without hitting the edge of the board and without having to cut a 22.5-degree angle. But it will also allow for a little ventilation or a little air to pass, kind of like a soffit on your house would. It's not a big gap, not enough for a lot of rain and stuff to get in, but there's still enough gap there. Somewhere in my front, I want to go ahead and cut two boards at the same time. That way both of my walls are exactly the same. Now some of these planks tend to warp a little bit, and they're not perfect. Again, we're using scrap fence planks. They cost a couple bucks a piece, so you kind of get what you can pay for on that. But basically try to find the two straightest ones you can. I'm also going to take off the edge of these. I'm just going to clean off the rough edge or the fuzzy stuff off the side of these, because I'm going to glue these together, and if I don't have a nice clean edge, they'll glue, but they don't glue as well. So I kind of fumbled my way through this, but basically all we're going to do is glue the sides on the front and the back. So I'm going to fast forward through most of this. You can do this however you want. You can use some brad nails to hold in place, some pin nails. You can just glue it and wait for the glue to dry. Entirely up to you how you want to fasten these together. This particular one, I just glued them together. I will use a couple brad nails later on, but not right now. But again, you can glue them, pop a couple brad nails in to hold them in place while the glue sets. You can clamp them, wait till the glue dries. Technically, after about 20 or 30 minutes, you can unclamp these. That glue is set enough that the pieces aren't going to come apart unless you've got a really warped piece that you're trying to squeeze together. So I'm making sure I get enough glue in here. I don't want glue squirting everywhere, but I got enough glue in there. As you can see, it's pushing out a little bit. I'm just taking my clamp and holding it in place. I did not tighten that clamp all the way. It's just holding the boards from falling over. But they're tight enough that when I slide this piece in, that it won't just fall down through there. And I'm going to clamp it. And again, I've just got it to where I'm holding it together as a square right now. I'm going to go back through, line up all my edges, make sure they're nice and straight. And then I'm going to put a couple more clamps on there just to tighten it down. And that way the glue has time to dry. So while I'm waiting on the glue to dry, I'm going to go ahead and put my dowel rod in here, measure it out, get a guesstimate about how far I want it or how far I want it to stick out. I'm going to go ahead and glue it up really good. I'm going to push it in, a little bit of glue on the outside edge of the hole. Put my finger in behind it so I can feel when it flushes out, wipe off the excess glue, and then cut it off to where I like it at the best. So I'm ready to put the roof on. I'm going to go ahead and measure my roof to about 8 inches. This is about an inch on each side of overhang. And I'm going to guesstimate around 4 inches wide. That way I have a nice little overhang on my birdhouse. It's not too wide and not too shallow. You can make yours as wide or as long as you want. Now on this, I'm going to go ahead and cut the two boards independently because I've only got one piece of wood. Normally I cut these both at the same time. Now I would normally cut these at the same time like I've been doing, but since I'm down to my last piece of scrap wood without cutting into another plank, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this one off. I'm going to lay it on top of the other one, spin it around and cut it off based on what I have. I'm going to make sure that my saw blade, when I pull it down, it just nips the tip of the other one, so I've got a perfectly flush two pieces of wood. So as I keep bumping that in, I bump it in a little bit and I take off just a little bit of the other one, and that way both my pieces are exactly the same length. Now before I cut my width, I want to cut my angle at the top. So again, we're at 22.5 degrees. Again, this will give me a 45-degree pitch at the top. Should match my roof line perfectly. So I'm going to set my miter saw to 22.5 degrees. You can do this with a skill saw if you need to. You could also run it through a table saw if you feel more comfortable with it. Since mine's a sliding compound miter saw, it makes it just as easy for me to put it in here and cut it off like this. But whatever works for you. And just a safety tip, when you're cutting these, make sure there's nothing behind you. Because as you'll see on one of these pieces, it definitely goes flying out of the back. So you want to make sure there's nothing back there. So my width I've got measured at 4 inches, or guesstimating around 4 inches. It can be a little more, a little less. Again, that's up to you. I've got my two peaks together like as a triangle at the top. And I want to cut both these at the same time. That way I've got the same width. Now that I've got my roof cut, I'm just fitting this on here to make sure I've got a good fit. When you're setting this up, if you're off a little bit, if you twist left and right a little bit, you'll feel that it lines up and you should get a nice perfect pitch on your roof, or your peak on your roof should match. Once I get it in place and I know that's going to fit good, I'm going to go ahead and glue it up. Now if you cut the angles on your sidewalls, glue the sidewalls also. Since I didn't cut the angles on my sidewall, my roof's not going to touch anyhow, so there's no sense in putting glue on the sidewall. I want to make sure I glue my ridge too, or my seam. This not only will add stability to the structure, but it also keeps the water from seeping in, and that way our little birdies stay nice and dry. Now when you're assembling your roof, if you've got good clean cuts and good clean edges, when you put this on, it'll pretty much just stick in place. Realistically, you could just let it sit there for 20-30 minutes and the glue would dry and it would sit there. But you may have some little air gaps or bubbles here and there. It may cause some structural instability. So once I get this on here, you can do a couple things. You could wrap a band around it. You could put some straps on it. You could rubber band it. I'm just going to pop a couple of brad nails in there. These are 1-inch brad nails. I'm not trying to nail the entire roof on. I'm just going to put a few in place to keep it kind of together while I finish clamping and gluing everything up. Anyone that does this knows things happen, and every now and then stuff doesn't happen like you want. Like I had a little nail pop there. Instead of just cutting it out of the video, I decided to show you how to fix it. Basically just take a small flathead screwdriver, push it back into the wood to where it's recessed, a little bit of wood filler, and you're good to go. So I'm ready to attach my base. Again, scrap piece of wood. I picked the base that I had that looked like it fit best. Pick out whatever piece you want, or cut whatever length and width you want. And you can set this up to put it on a 4x4 post if you're going to back post it. These are probably going to hang from a tree, so I'm not too worried about it. Now I want to clamp these on. I'm not going to put these clamps on super tight. Again, I just put this roof on. The roof has been glued, but it's only been sitting for 30 or 40 minutes. That clamp is not super tight. It's just basically holding the birdhouse base to the top right now so it doesn't fall apart on me. I'm going to do the same thing on the sides. I'm going to kind of put one around the front at first just to hold it together. Again, it's not tight. If you squeeze these down right now, you're going to blow your roof apart. So again, we're just holding it all together as if you were using your hands to hold it together, not tight. Now I've added a few more clamps around here. As you can see, as I'm moving them around, I'm just barely squeezing these down. They're not super tight again. I'm just going to the point where the glue just barely squirts out, and that's it. This piece in the front here, you can clamp fairly tight because it's wood against wood. Again, our roof on the back and our seam down the middle, if you put too much pressure on those, you're still going to blow everything apart. So again, it's kind of holding it together. I worked my way around and just snugged them up to the point where it was just barely squeezing the glue out. And I'm going to let it set and dry for a while. Again, if you wanted more brad nails, you could brad nail all this together and be done with it. I don't want that many nail holes in mine. So there's our end result. Nice little birdhouse. You can paint it. You can just hang it the way it is. For under $4, basically $2 for the plank, $2 for the dowel rod, some glue, a couple brad nails.